In a moment, Gordon Brown may be hosting the G-20 summit, as you heard, but as his popularity in the polls continues to dwindle in the UK, the Conservative Party is gaining ground. So much so that President Obama met with the Tory leader David Cameron ahead of the summit to get his take on the crisis. Our colleague Maria Bartiromo caught up with Cameron and began by asking him what the UK needs to do right now.
I think the biggest step we need to take right here in the UK is to get credit moving. I see this as a credit crunch. I see it as a monetary crisis. And what you have to do is you've got to sort out the toxic assets in the banks. You have to clean up their balance sheets. There are a number of ways that can be done. The British government has decided to introduce this insurance scheme. I hope that will work. You have to recapitalise the banks so they have the available capital. But then vitally, you've got to get them lending again. And so we've argued for a big and bold and simple national loan guarantee scheme where the government actually stands behind some of the new lending that the banks need to do. I think that's the single most important thing, combined with what I've said about trade. While I fully agree that those countries that can have a fiscal stimulus, cut their taxes, increase spending, those that can should. Here in the UK, I've argued that with a budget deficit of over 10% of our national product, we simply can't afford a discretionary extra stimulus. And so I've been saying to our Prime Minister, look, don't pretend that we can do that in the UK because you haven't left us enough room in order to do that.
So it sounds like you are backing Obama's plans, but much more critical of Brown's plans. But at the same time, we're still talking about $1 trillion in terms of this toxic asset plan.
Every country is different. Every country has to take the right approach for its own economy. I think the commonalities are that both the US and the UK have a problem with toxic assets. We both have to deal with that issue. We both have to make sure our banks have adequate capital. We're doing it in a slightly different way, but that's as it should be. But on the issue of the fiscal stimulus, I think there's a real difference between America, a country that has a reserve currency, that's a much larger economy, and Britain, where we have a 10 or more % budget deficit. It's not a reserve currency. People don't have to hold our currency as an asset. And so we're in a different situation, and I believe I'm telling it as I see it.
Do you feel that governments of the world are fanning the flames when it comes to class warfare? This week, we see protesters on the street. We saw Fred Goodwin's house from RBS vandalized. Do you feel that this could be worrisome in terms of real class warfare going on?
I don't see it like that. I mean, what I would say is this. Anyone who wants to protest has a right to protest, but no one has a right to break the law, to intimidate people, to smash up property, and we shouldn't have any truck with that at all. Of course, governments have got to act effectively, and where there has been appalling abuse in terms of pay and bonuses and the rest of it, government's got to regulate properly, government's got to act properly. We now own, regrettably, some of these banks, and we should be very clear that there aren't rewards for failure, and people shouldn't get big bonuses when their banks have failed so badly. So government has got to act properly, but I don't think even ineffective government is a justification for violence on our streets. Of course it isn't.
Let's talk about the G20 and the focus here and how we really got here. We're looking for solutions as far as the global economic upset. How would you characterize the situation, how we arrived?
Well, it's a very important meeting. It's the right meeting because we don't just have the richest and largest nations. We've also got some of the emerging countries like Brazil and India, and that's very important. So I think it's an important meeting. What matters, I think, most of all, is they really make progress on trade. To me, the greatest stimulus we could give the world economy is to move forward to a Doha round, complete that round, and to stop any lurch to protectionism. That's the biggest priority, and I hope that's what will be in the communique. But I worry that they won't go far enough.
Well, Cameron's view was backed by Barack Obama when he met the press yesterday.
The global economy is now so fundamentally interconnected that we can only meet this challenge together. We can't create jobs at home if we're not doing our part to support strong and stable markets around the world.
Well, Jeremy is still in the studio.